Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. Thank you for joining us live. We're here for a Ask the Brokers live evening. We're here to answer your questions. That's what this is all about, is answering your questions about what it is that you need to know when purchasing gold, silver, platinum, palladium, coins, bars, rounds. How do you keep it? How do you protect your privacy? How do you get your shipment? How do you know where to start if you've never purchased metals before? Where can you get started? What methods of payment are, timelines that you should be able to expect. All the questions you have are good questions. And as my son, Kaiser, who has helped us do the promo for this, said, the only dumb question tonight is the one that you don't ask, because whatever question is on your mind is most likely on the minds of dozens, if not hundreds of other people who'll be watching this live stream or watching the recording. So you're going to help lots of people out by answering your question, by asking your question. So you'll notice I am here, Dunnigan Kaiser, and my sons Elijah and Kaiser are also here. And we are all licensed brokers through Miles Franklin Precious Metals under the state of Minnesota. And we're here to answer your questions. Any question is fair game. We may not know the answer, in which case we might say we have to get back to you. And here to answer your questions. So type your questions in the live chat stream on your YouTube channel that you're watching this on, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. So Elijah and Kaiser, if you guys want to just introduce yourself briefly, and we'll get to some viewers' questions right away.
Yes, so I'm Elijah K. Johnson, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm a licensed broker with Miles Franklin Precious Metals. I've also been doing the YouTube channel for a while, and this is my brother Kaiser.
That's me. Yeah, I'm Kaiser Johnson, and I too am a licensed broker with Miles Franklin Precious Metals. Yeah, that's most of my story.
And I think one of the things that we were going to maybe start off before we get into viewers' questions is probably the question that's asked the most to us is, where do we start? I think that's a great question. And it really has to do with your own personal circumstance. But if this is your first time investing in precious metals, we were talking right before we went on air, and I think junk silver is a great place to start. Dad, did you want to share with the viewers why you thought junk silver was a great place to start?
Sure. And I guess my answer partly comes out of two things. One is my background for having run the Reluctant Preppers channel since 2013 that morphed into Liberty and Finance, because in preparedness, we're always talking about having multiple options open, keeping your optionality, because none of us really knows exactly the way the future is going to play out. You do try to do thought experiments. You do try to think through different scenarios. You think, what will I do if this happens? What will I do if that happens? If I make all my plans in this direction, but then that gets thwarted, what's my plan B? What's my plan C? So number one principle, I believe, in if you don't have any precious metals yet and you're just getting started, is to keep your options open. Try to choose a form of precious metal that gives you the most flexibility, the most optionality, the most ability to act, and to use that resource as an asset to help you in many different types of scenarios. The second aspect that's going to lead to the conclusion here on the junk silver that you already mentioned is what we've been learning from talking to Andy Schechtman and others in the precious metals arena. And that is that it's not so much what you like, it's what the next person's going to trust, because it's quite likely we are entering into an era of reduced trust. We certainly have seen lots of like civil unrest, that sort of things in the last 2 years. We had roads being shut down. We had whole cities being shut down. We had the supply chains being disrupted. In an environment like that, where you have reduced trust, you want to at least have the thing of value that you're trying to trade for what you need, whether that's food, fuel, repairs, a ride, services of any kind. You want that to be something that's undisputably recognized, that's immediately considered to be of high value. You don't want to be having the conversation, arguing with the person that you're trying to make a trade with, or make a deal with, or make an arrangement with. You don't want to be arguing about whether this thing is real or not. You don't want to argue about whether you can't do the transaction because it's too big and bulky and they can't make proper change for you. So that's why junk silver it checks all the boxes you can come up with. It's immediately recognizable. It came from the US Mint. So most of our viewers, over 90% of our viewers, are in the US. Most people and everybody in the US is going to recognize junk silver because it was pocket change for the last, since anytime before 1965, it was the coins of the realm. 90% silver, dimes, quarters, half dollars, and dollar coins. People immediately recognize. They can see because it's worn in most cases that it's real. It wasn't just made last night in China by some forger, and they trust its authenticity and validity. They know the source of it. Okay, but it's also small. Dimes are only a 14th of an ounce, and quarters about a 1/5 of an ounce. So you get small size for small transactions, and especially if the nominal price of metals goes up a lot going forward, you don't want to be walking over the farmer's market with a kilo bar or a 100-ounce bar of silver trying to buy a dozen eggs and a loaf of bread or something and hoping somebody has change. You want something that is easily transactable. So that's why those are some of the, just in a quick hurry, that's why junk silver checks off a lot of those boxes. And frankly, until recently, it was really affordable. Recently, it's become so recognized as highly desirable for a lot of those reasons I just mentioned, that it's been bid up now to where it's on par with, or in some cases, even more expensive per ounce than some of the more modern sovereign minted coins, that sort of thing. But that's a good place to start, is junk silver. Number two, I would say, is 1 ounce sovereign minted coins. Again, it's highly recognized. People know where they came from. They're very difficult to counterfeit, that sort of thing. They're still small enough to be divisible and leave you options open. And then after you've got those two bases covered, then maybe if you're just bulking up and trying to add more ounces, then 10-ounce, kilo, and 100-ounce bars are a good way to go. The worst place to start would be 1,000-ounce COMEX bars. They're very, very difficult to handle, to insure when you ship them, to get anybody to even allow you to ship them, that sort of thing, to sell, to buy. It really narrows down your universe of choices down to very few trading partners. And that means major dealers, basically. They're really great for vault storage, for IRAs, that kind of thing, or for large estates, inheritances, things like that. But it's the exact opposite of the spectrum from what we asked, which is where's a good place to get started? I think junk silver tops the list there.
Right. And I think a couple of viewers are asking this question, is what is a good goal for the amount of silver or gold to start with, right? And I think the question, I mean, we all wish, we could be independently wealthy and we could have all this huge treasure chest, right? But I think the thing to look at is your own situation. And then also just a change of mindset, at least in my opinion, is, well, how much do I want outside of precious metals? Because precious metals are the assets that have been money for 6,000 years, right? So that should be the default money, the default wealth, the default storage place for your wealth.
That's your real savings account.
You should ask the question of, how much do I want to speculate with? So that's kind of the way that I think about it. But did either of you have any perspective on that, is how much precious metals is enough?
Well, I would rephrase, if I can just chime in, and I was just going to restate what you just said, is how much of my nest egg do I want to risk to currency risk, inflation risk, banking risk, credit system risk, government confiscation risk, bank bail-in risk, and all the other types of, or in the case of what we saw in Canada, jurisdictional, what would you call it? Policy denial type risk, so social credit score, et cetera. So if whatever part of your nest egg you don't want to expose to all those risks, then your savings account is in precious metals. Kaiser, I interrupted you.
Oh yeah, no, I know. Maurice Jackson, another broker at Miles Franklin, has talked about the idea of, for a long time, 1 ounce of silver was 1 day's wage, and the idea of having a year's worth of nest egg for everybody in your family and that kind of thing. But I think, so 365 ounces per person in the family, as he said, is a great starting point if you're just trying to start, moving stuff over into silver. But I think, Elijah, what you're saying there of you should have your money be real money, and not be as subject to all these things, like Dad, that you're mentioning with the inflation risks and, having things that are in banks and having your assets frozen, in times of distress and stuff like that. So having those kind of risks associated with it. So
we also have interviewed, I'm trying to think of Jerry Robinson, the author of Bankruptcy of Our Nation, several times. And he talks about, look, you got to have a cash reserve. Rick Rule says this too. He says, have a cash reserve and then have a bullion liquidity and then do your investing and everything above that. Well, if you think about it from a family standpoint, what is your maintenance requirement? What is your outgo to pay for the food, the shelter, the basic energy needs that you have on a monthly recurring basis? Most families should have a pretty good handle on what their outgo is every month. So the question is, back to you then, is how many months of a nest egg do you want to have? Do you want a 3-month nest egg, a 6-month nest egg, a 1 year, 2 year? How long would you like to get by if there was a serious disruption in the banking system or the credit markets, or if the value of your so-called dollars, in the bank went down so far that they weren't useful or weren't accessible for whatever reason? How much of a cushion, a reserve do you want to have for your household? And then you can back into it the way that Kaiser was saying about an ounce of silver per day per family member for a year kind of thing. So
we have another question here. This is from Indy, and they're wanting to know about the IRA situation. If they have an IRA or some sort of retirement account, what do they do with it? And obviously that's a question for a financial advisor, but if you are looking to invest it in precious metals, you can actually do that, which is really cool. And we're just going to be about to release a video explaining all the steps on that, but it's very simple. There are really just three steps you have to go through. So it's setting up a self-directed IRA account. And on our website, libertyandfinance.com, just click Gold IRA and it'll have all the instructions there for you and all the links that you'll need. And obviously you can always give us a call, and the numbers in the description of this video as well. But so the first step is just setting up a self-directed IRA account, rolling over any funds into that account, then choosing a storage facility that you'd like to work with, and then letting your self-directed IRA know that that is the storage facility you'd like to work with. And then the next step, all you have to do is call us and then have us help purchase the metals for you. And then we ship it to the depository once we invoice the self-directed IRA. So that's really the three steps: the self-directed IRA, setting up that, the storage facility, picking the storage facility that you'd like, and then purchasing your metals. But if either of you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like Elijah said, it's very straightforward. It takes a couple of weeks to get done most of the time, just, from step 1 to step 3. But it is pretty straightforward. And, there are a number of, there's one company that we work with through Miles Franklin a lot. It's a company called New Direction Trust, and they have really good custodians there who can help you through the whole setting up the process, funding the account, that kind of thing, and hold your hand kind of from step 1 to step 3, and then we can help you get the metals into the account.
One more distinction I want to make sure, because the question was asked if you have an IRA. Most people who have an IRA are free to do what they want. They can go ahead and open up this new precious metals IRA and do a rollover into it and start purchasing metals right away through us. That works really well. If you have a 401k, the question is, are you still connected with that employer? Because if you are currently employed by an employer who has a 401k retirement plan and they're still making contributions into it, like matching contributions, that kind of thing, you usually have very limited ability to, take a distribution or rollover from that while you're still connected to that employer. But if you're no longer, if that was a former employer or you're retired or whatever, then you may have already rolled that over into an IRA, or you may just be kind of coasting along under that same old 401k. You can absolutely roll over from that into a new precious metals IRA. And then the big decision you'll have that you didn't mention is choosing between a traditional versus a Roth precious metals IRA. Big difference there is when taxes are owed, because the dark truth about any IRA, well, there's two really. One is that everything you do inside an IRA is completely transparent to the IRS, number one. And they're salivating the entire time thinking about when they're going to get their taxes off of that. But the two flavors of an IRA, and again, we're not tax advisors, but just in general terms, if it's a traditional IRA, taxes will be due on the time that the distributions are made from the IRA, versus on a Roth IRA, you have to pay the tax before you put the money in. So if you're going to roll over from an existing IRA or an existing 401k into a new precious metals IRA, you'll need to make a decision. Would you rather pay your taxes now, or would you rather pay them in the future? And it's a little bit of a guessing game as to whether tax rates are likely to go up or down in the future. If you've seen the trends of history, it seems unlikely that they're going to go down. So you might want to consider paying your taxes sooner rather than later. And then there's some distinct precious metals capital gains tax advantages if you do use a Roth precious metals IRA, as far as not having to pay capital gains taxes in the future on those potential gains in your precious metals. So lots of things to think about, but the first 3 steps are really easy. Pick a custodian, pick a depository, roll over your money, and then you're ready to make purchases underneath your IRA.
We have another question here, which I was just going to share. So the question is, do you ever change newer coins to numismatic for clients? So that's a really good question. I have had some clients wanting to actually change their more numismatic coins for bullion coins to get more ounces, which I think is a really interesting perspective, because I think one thing to think about is if we do get into a situation where there's like a scramble for precious metals, well, maybe the numismatic premium may come down on some of like the proof coins and all of those, because people are just concerned, well, it's just the gold and silver that I want. I want the most ounces as possible. And I think that's a really good strategy. You know, if you have collector coins and you see that, wait a second, if I turn these in, I can get quite a few more ounces, maybe take advantage of that. I know we've also seen recently people turning in silver eagles to get more ounces, because the premium on silver eagles is just crazy now. You know, we were buying them, you know, we can at the moment, I think, buy them for a swap. We can buy them back at over $8 over spot. So, you know, you can swap in for a lower premium item and get more ounces of silver that way. But did you have any thought? Did either of you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it's certainly something we will do if you want to change either direction. You know, we're happy to help you do a buyback, do a swap, whether you're going from gold to silver, silver to gold, numismatic to non-numismatic, or vice versa. I mean, there are some things out there where for whatever reason that they may have, people want a specific coin or they want that kind of thing, and we're happy to help you with that. But also Elijah's right that when it comes to, you know, there are some numismatics that have these big premiums on there right now, and you can take advantage of that and get a lot more ounces by going the opposite direction on it too. So.
Yeah, I wanted to augment the last thing that you said, Kaiser, about premiums. And premiums do change over time. They have a life of their own. It's not, premiums don't just scale linearly with spot price. It isn't,
Right.
It does not typically happen. You should not plan that just if the spot price doubles, that means the premium is going to double. That's not guaranteed in any sense. It's going to depend on the supply and demand of that particular type of investable metal at that time relative to everything else, and it is separate from the spot price. So as we've interviewed Bob Moriarty, I think, Elijah, you've typically been the one to interview him. One of his favorite sayings, and I love it, he says, buy what's cheap and sell what's expensive. Makes sense, right? We've always been told buy low, sell high. That's the rule of investing, right? So when these premiums go up and down as they do over time for whatever different reasons, be aware of that and follow that. And if people or your brokers, you ask them, is there anything that has extraordinarily unusually high or low premiums right now, then you might find an opportunity. And Andy has pointed those things out emphatically to his clients over the last several decades. He talked about a time not that long ago, less than a decade ago, when the premiums on numismatic coins become so low, they were within just a few percent of modern bullion coins. And he was telling every one of his clients who had purchased modern bullion coins from him over the years, he says, I'm going to fly out to your place. I'm going to bring a briefcase full of numismatic coins. You're going to give me your old, your modern bullion coins. I'm going to leave you with numismatics because you won't see this opportunity again to get them that cheaply. And then the opposite just happened 2 weeks ago when we had him on. He said, I'm swapping back American Silver Eagles at $9.25 over spot, and people can get into these bars for $3.75 for Valcambi bars or $4.45 for over spot for Royal Canadian Mint bars. So there are those opportunities that make it exactly the opportune time to do these kind of swaps and end up with more ounces. The other thing we haven't mentioned here is reportability. It's a question that comes up a lot, is mandated reportability. And sometimes people find, with as flexible as junk silver is, for example, it is one of the things that's subject to mandated dealer reporting if you sell it back in a certain high quantity, $1,000 face values or more, just like bars, silver bars and rounds are. 1,000 ounces or more in a single transaction is mandated dealer reporting when you sell back to a dealer. 1,000 ounces or more of silver bars and silver rounds. So if people have those products and they would prefer to have something that never would get into dealer mandated reporting, it can happen in gold too. With gold, 25 ounces in a single transaction of Canadian silver gold maple leafs, or a kilogram of any size bars of gold at the same time in a single transaction is mandated dealer reporting. So Andy has pointed out from time to time, you can do a like for like swap, silver for silver or gold for gold, and it has no is not a taxable event. There's no dealer mandated reporting because there's a cost basis carry forward. There's no taxable event that happens. So if people had a whole bunch of junk silver, way more than $1,000 face value, they could swap it all in a single transaction if they wanted to, or a large portion of it, more than $1,000 face value of it in a single transaction for example, any kind of sovereign minted silver coins, and they would end up with something that has no mandated dealer reporting limits when they would go to sell it in the future. That's just something to keep in mind. There can be ounce benefits. You can do a arbitrage to end up with more ounces. That's what you guys have been talking about. There's also reportability benefits. You can swap in something that has mandated reporting limits for something that does not have mandated reporting limits and get yourself out from under that. So in the future, you never have to think about it again from a mandated reporting standpoint.
And I think, the key also to mention is what we're talking about here is what obligation does Miles Franklin have to report certain transactions? So this is completely different from the obligation you have for self-reporting or any tax obligations you'd have. That would be for a tax advisor. What we're sharing here is on buybacks, what reporting are we obligated to do? So,
yeah.
And I think another question here, we had a couple actually, and we could answer this in a couple different ways, but one point that I wanted to make is the question is, what role will silver have if we do go onto some sort of gold standard? And you're seeing movements around the world where central banks are acquiring gold, especially Russia and China right now. And Russia just for a little while was kind of pegging the ruble to gold or vice versa there. But we're seeing movements towards that where countries are looking at gold, and there's a lot of speculation that maybe the currency could become backed by gold. What role will silver have in that case? I think what I'd point to is if we do go back in the past when we were on a gold standard, the gold silver ratio was a lot lower than what it is today. And when we see if there is a gold standard in the future, the price of gold would seemingly have to be a lot higher than it is today. You'd need a lot higher price for gold to be able to back any currency with it. So when we do see a rise in the price of gold, typically the gold silver ratio falls and silver rises more. So that would be my expectation, is if we do go onto some sort of gold standard or some countries adopt gold, that we'd see a huge demand for gold. And we also see demand for silver and that gold silver ratio falling. But did either of you have any perspectives on that?
Not
specifically. No,
covered it pretty well.
Like a good summary.
Definitely. So I think one of the other questions, also kind of getting back to what we were talking about at the beginning, was what do we start with? What is going to be the safest silver to have and going to be the most useful in the future? We talked about junk silver. One viewer also mentioned the 100-gram Valcambi silver combi bar. And I think this is very interesting because it's kind of the smallest denomination that you can have for silver. It's a bar, 100-gram bar, but you can break it into 1-gram bars. The premium is very, very high on this product, but I think it goes back to, well, why are we purchasing the metal, right? If you're purchasing it for insurance, then it doesn't matter too much what the price is at that point. But are there any particular products? What are your thoughts on the 100-gram Valcambi combi bar? And are there any kind of other considerations we want to think about when considering what we should be purchasing first?
Yeah, I'd like to chime in on this one because I think it has to do, again, just like when you buy tools or when you load up your wallet with cash before going to a fair or something like that. Just because, like, let's say $1 bills are handy, but so are $5 or so are $10 or so are $20. But you don't do all of one or all and none of the other. They'll have different scenarios where they'll come in handy. So I just spoke with someone last week, actually, a client who had purchased a significant quantity of the Valcambi 100-gram silver bars. And I was thinking, why would you load up on so much of that thing? I see that it has a purpose, and that purpose is very useful. It has high utility in a particular purpose, but so does a Swiss Army knife, for example. But that doesn't mean that you fill your garage with Swiss Army knives necessarily. You need a different kind. You need shovels for digging in the garden, or you need whatever, a jump starter for starting a car. You need different tools for different tasks. So I would just say my inclination would be, yes, have some of those Valcambi 100-ounce bars with a little break off 1 gram. Those are extremely useful, but then have some junk silver. That's the next step. And then have some 1-ounce silver coins, and then have some bars beyond that. Don't like stock up the bulk ounces. If you're going to take your whole inheritance, you just got this inheritance and you're going to sock it all the way into a savings account of silver, I wouldn't choose 100-gram breakable divisible bars for which I'm going to pay a huge premium and end up with half as many ounces of silver as something that's going to give you a more efficient blend till you get a lower average cost of silver and still have some of those for the utility that they do offer.
We have a question here as well about platinum. It was actually asked during the beginning of the interview again when we were talking about, well, what do we purchase first? And the comment here is bartering is easy with gold and silver, platinum not so much. And what I was thinking about there is that gold and silver have been money, recognized money for 6,000 years. Platinum, not so much, as the viewer has mentioned. It has had a lot more industrial use, jewelry use, but for money, very little throughout history. Any perspectives on that? What about investing in platinum?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, at least, the way that I look at platinum is that it's a super rare metal. It kind of most perfectly fits that definition of precious metal. It's 30 times more rare than gold, and something like 80% of it comes out of South Africa, which there's all sorts of instability there geopolitically and all that kind of stuff. And so it's used in tons of things, especially in tons of industrial applications, as well as you mentioned, jewelry and that kind of thing. And so, and with that, and with where it's at right now in price compared to the historically, where it usually sits at about 30% more expensive than gold, sometimes even more than that. And right now it's about half the price of gold. It's very appealing as a place where myself and my family are looking to be able to do that kind of swapping later on for
arbitrage
gold,
against historical norms,
yeah. Arbitrage that Dunnigan was talking about earlier, and this idea of using it as an investment and a speculation vehicle that also happens to be a precious metal, rather than expecting that to be something that I'm bartering with or something like that.
Yeah, I would agree. And Andy Scheckman mirrored this in the last time we interviewed him this week, actually, for the weekly market update. He said that in his view, gold is recognized as the premier monetary metal for storage and preservation of value and insurance and hedging throughout history. Silver is unsurpassed for immediate transactions between individuals. It's the people's money. And platinum just doesn't have a historical precedent as money. It really is a fine metal commodity that's very rare. And so if you see that there's a historical industrial anomaly in its value versus average throughout history, then you might want to consider, but you'd be thinking of that the same way you would consider investing in nickel or cobalt or copper or something like that, some other industrial commodity metal, not primarily as a monetary metal, even though several mints of the modern world do make sovereign minted, face value, legal tender coins out of platinum. It still is not recognized and accepted historically as a monetary metal.
We have a question here again from a viewer. They say, I hear all the time about shortages in silver, but here on the East Coast, I don't have a problem getting silver at coin or pawn shops. Any thoughts on that?
Well, what thought that I have is, I mean, to some extent, we're not having a trouble of getting it. We're just selling it so fast that most of what we have is back ordered. We know we're getting it in and that kind of thing, but we're selling enough of it, and we're seeing premiums affected by that, and also we're seeing that everything is back ordered. And so I don't know what the premiums are on the East Coast in pawn shops and coin shops and that kind of thing, but we're certainly seeing the effect of high demand and still a limited supply happening as far as what we're seeing as brokers.
Another thing that there's a big difference, and I think you just touched on this, Kaiser, is the difference between in stock versus, yeah, it's on its way, we can get it here in a few weeks, that kind of thing. And a lot of the shipments of sovereign minted silver coins that arrive in our bullion operations are already sold. So we were selling them 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 weeks out in advance, as we had to purchase them, 10 to 12 weeks in advance. By the time they come into our shop, many of them are sold out already. So when people call up and say, well, you don't have any of those in stock right now, okay, I'll call you back in a few weeks. And it's like, that's not going to help. That's not going to help, before they hang up the phone. The other thing to be aware of is everybody has their own individual idea of, oh, I can get plenty. Well, plenty for you might not be the same as plenty for someone else. If you go into a local coin shop and they just got in 2 monster boxes of eagles that somebody swapped in yesterday, that can seem like plenty. But when we get a call from someone who just got an inheritance and they're looking for 20 monster boxes of silver eagles and 4 monster boxes of a whole bunch of gold or something, we can be scraping and scrounging around trying to be able to fill their order. And you look at a lot of these online sites, and there's notify me, notify me, notify me is quite common to see under many of the products. So many major dealers are experiencing difficulty in high volume of keeping things in stock. And so, but if you do find a local source in your sort of your micro cosm of your local area, and the premiums are not excessive, and it's a trustworthy source, then go for it. There's no problem with that. But it's something that not everybody has that advantage. We've certainly heard stories from multiple people, like for example in the Denver and Colorado Springs area, saying they go into their local shops, and when the shipments do come in, there's a line around the block, and then they have nothing for the next 3 days, that kind of thing. So not everybody has the advantage that you have. If you do find it, might want to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think 2 things to just mention again. There is the delay on a lot of items, especially the sovereign minted coins. A lot of them are out a month. One of them, I was just checking today. I was shocked. We had some Krugerrands in actually. But for most of the sovereign minted coins, here's kind of what you're going to see is you're going to see very, very high premiums. For example, the silver eagles that we have in stock, but those are around $14 over spot, or you're going to be looking at about a month delay. And occasionally, we'll have certain products in, but still, that for the sovereign minted coins, we're still looking at around $6 or $7 over spot. So there's one thing of, well, can you get the product, but also is the premium reasonable at the moment as well? So the premiums have gone up as well, and that's due to high demand and low supply. So kind of thinking about all those things, this is definitely a different environment now than we saw just a few months ago when we were doing specials for Philharmonics for 365 over. It's like crazy to speak about that nowadays.
Yeah.
I wanted to chime in. There was a humorous question that went by about 5 minutes ago that we missed sight of. Someone says, which skips better on water, a silver dollar or a silver eagle? A silver eagle or a gold eagle? And I was thinking, okay, that's a cute question. I thought one answer to it might be interesting, and that is, if you need a ride across Puget Sound or something like that, maybe a silver eagle will do the job better than a gold eagle. But if you need a ride across the Atlantic Ocean or across the Pacific Ocean, or to get out of a country, there's a reason that the U.S. Air Force sews a 1 ounce gold coin into the bomber jacket of people that are pilots who fly behind enemy lines, that sort of thing. Because if they come down, that's going to get them out of there, and it's going to be recognized anywhere in the world. It's going to be valued by any culture at any time. And the amount of energy, the amount of value that can be contained in a single ounce of gold is astonishing. Like today, it's approximately $2,000. Well, how long does it take the ordinary person to earn $2,000 today? That's the amount of life energy that's stored in that. It has much more power to get you what you need, but then it can be difficult to use for very small needs, because again, as we talked about before, you're needing somebody who can make change for it, or else you're going to lose an inordinate amount of the value there. So they have different purposes, and they can each get you across different bodies of water.
Definitely. And kind of to just bounce off that as well is we had a viewer say, I paid for dinner with a silver eagle yesterday. So that's fantastic. If you can maybe type in a bit more details of how did that happen? That's just so cool, I think. And a testament to what we might see in the future is a greater acceptance of just trading real value for something of real value, you know, instead of the paper money that intrinsically has no value today. As you mentioned, Ed, the gold coin is, it stores in life energy in some sense. It has that work. It takes work to get that out of the ground. So it's a store of wealth, and paper money doesn't take any work to print at all. So pretty much none. We have another viewer question here as well.
And it's a question I know that we've run into a few times.
Quite a few.
Where people ask us, in the question being, it says, the dealers are not smart to sell it at these prices unless they don't understand inflation and the US dollar going away. And I think all of us have been asked, well, if this is such a good investment, why are you guys selling it? Why aren't you just hoarding it all? And
why would Andy Scheckman, this happens about once or twice a month. Somebody will say he can't be sincere because why would he be on here every week trying to convince people to give them their cruddy fiat dollars for his good metals? Why would he trade, good metals for cruddy dollars? So we can take a crack at that again tonight. Why does that make sense for any seller of anything that is real and of value? Makes sense to do it in the currency of the realm, whether it's a shoe seller or a grocery seller or a boat seller or whatever. So go ahead, Kaiser. Where were you going with that?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, there's some things of real value if they're selling groceries or something like that. I can eat a lot of food, but I can't eat 1,000 steaks. Not
but all at the same time.
Well, no, not at one time. Yeah, I probably have in my life. But there's something analogous here in the sense of if we were just as brokers and dealers, if all of us were just going, sell, we'll sell you precious metals for your fiat currency, and then I'll just sit on this fiat currency. But all of us turn it back into precious metals, and we just can't buy. I'm not usually buying 50,000 ounces at a time, which are these shipments that we're getting in from these various mints, and so it's something where we want to be able to, one, help other people get something of real value, and we can't hoard it all for ourselves. And so the trading allows us the option to then obtain it for ourselves as well. And so
and also just to point out,
makes sense.
Yeah, and any dealer in anything, just stop and think about it for a minute. Any dealer in anything is not just someone who sits on a hoarded pile of something and just sells it off until it's gone and then they're out of business. They're generally in the purpose of buying things in large quantities, wholesale, and then making sure that they make them available to people at appropriate retail availability. And then with every sale, they take the money that they get from that and they go back and buy more goods. You refresh your stock. You have to turn around. So as soon as Miles Franklin sells a monster box of Silver Eagles, they take the money from that and go around and get ready and order more. So it's a matter of not hoarding the fiat currency. That's not the point. And please, people, please take that lesson to heart. None of us should be hoarding currency beyond a reasonable limit to have a cash reserve. But if you're storing up your life savings in checking account, savings account, US dollars, you really need to be aware that is a depreciating asset. It's a depleting asset. It's having its value drained out of it by policy. And that's not a good store of value, which means it's not money, because the definition of money is it should be a good store of value. So we've all been dumbed down enough that our great grandparents knew that when you did a hard day's work and you got paid in real money, you put it in your pocket, it was going to be good now, next month, next year, 10 years, to your kids, your grandkids, it was still had value because it was real money. We haven't had real money for a long time in our currency. And so a lot of us have forgotten that the fiat that we use to make everyday transactions is just a medium of exchange. It's not something to be hoarding up to store up your life's savings. It's not going to save up the money for you. It's not going to maintain the purchasing power.
We actually got an answer from the viewer who paid with a Silver Eagle. So they actually talked with the owner of the restaurant, and they found out that they were both Austrian economists. So as a joke, he paid with a silver eagle. So that's pretty fun.
Well,
It's
David
fun
Morgan, whom we've interviewed, you have and I have both, Eli, many times, said he carries around typically silver rounds in his pockets, and he will hand them as a tip to a server who does a particularly good job on a significant meal, that kind of thing. And if they don't recognize it, it's a teachable moment, and he'll take that. He's a lover of spreading learning and teaching, and so he'll take that to educate someone who maybe isn't yet an Austrian economist, but will be as soon as they learn that what they're holding in their hand is better than all those dollars he could have given them. So.
Yeah, we had someone asking, are buffalo rounds or any other rounds having a long wait time too? Yeah, we're 3 to 4 weeks out on buffaloes right now. But again, as Dunnigan mentioned earlier, now's the time to lock those in if you want them, because it's not like in 3 to 4 weeks we'll get them and then we'll just have a bunch in stock. We're selling out 50,000, 80,000, 100,000 ounces ahead of time, and as soon as they come in, they're already going out to the people who've already purchased them. We do have, again, as Elijah mentioned, we do have some sovereigns in stock. A lot of them are ones with higher premiums, but we also have some surprising products in stock, some bars ready to go, and we actually have some mixed generics ready to go right now too. I think at least we did yesterday, where we have some that are in stock and ready to ship, some silver rounds and that kind of thing. And so it's just kind of a game of, if you call in and you really want something that's in stock, we will sit down with you and we will help you find what that is. And if you want a particular product, we'll tell you how long it'll be, and then we can lock it now so that when it does come in, you're on the list to get it first. So
it's so key. And one of the things that I've noticed as well is, we do have some sovereign minted coins in stock. Typically, either they're going to have the higher premiums, or in some cases there are some relatively lower premium ones. Sometimes, still around $5 or $6 over spot, but $6-7 over spot, right around there. But they're going to be coins often that are not the most recognizable, but they're still from some of the major mints. So you're going to have some of the Canadian coins in stock and still a relatively low premium, like the 2-ounce Canadian coins. Or we have some coins from the British Mint. Actually, they're called Little John coins. They're this mythic character, adventurer, looks like on the back, but it has the Queen on the front. It's still going to be, from the Royal Mint. So it's going to be from one of the major mints. And typically what I've seen is when you do go to sell, the buyback on those is pretty similar, regardless of whether they're one of the most recognizable coins or not, as long as it's from one of those major mints. But we do have some of those in stock as well.
Yeah, and I think something like I think we might have Noah's Arks in stock.
We do have
and
those,
a couple. So yeah, as you mentioned, a couple of these ones that are either they are legal tender, they're just not the standard one that's made by that mint, but the Canadian and British, and I think we have some Australian ones in too, some animal coins and that kind of thing. So yeah,
I was thinking about, you guys were talking about, and I was mentioning earlier, when people call in and say, "Oh, okay, we're behind, we're backordered on all of our sovereign minted coins. I'll call you back in a month and hopefully I have some stuff in stock." Then I go, no, wait. It's like if you're at a big, like a state fair where there's a food booth, and most of the people haven't figured out it's lunchtime yet, but they're about to, and you see that the food truck's starting to sell out of their sandwiches and they're having to get resupplied or whatever. If you think, oh, there's starting to be a line, I'll come back when it's not so busy, it's like it's about to get a lot more busy. Andy and Rick Rule have both talked to us about how less than 0.5% of the investments in our whole country are in precious metals, or even precious metals related, like stocks and that sort of thing, mining stocks. So for most people, this isn't even on their radar yet, but it's come into the news recently with Russia doing what they did recently, pegging the ruble to gold in response to being kicked out of the SWIFT system and sanctions being imposed about the US dollar, that sort of thing. So when it starts coming into people's mind, well, why did they do that? And why did Germany ask for all their gold back and that sort of thing? So when people start to wake up, and they're starting to, there's going to be this rush to now, instead of 0.5%, whether it gets to be 2%, 4%, it got as high as 8%, I think, back in 2011. When that happens, you don't want to be the one who thought, well, I really did want some, but I thought I'd wait for the line to go down. So it's just something to think about.
Definitely. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate the questions and just having this conversation with you. We hope to do it again. Maybe we can do this once a month. Put it in the comments if you enjoyed the Ask the Brokers live. Just let us know, and we'll definitely be on sometime soon. Obviously, we have every evening at 9 p.m. Eastern. We have our guest interviews as well. We're going to be having guest interviews every single day, 7 days a week. So make sure to check out those 9 p.m. Eastern. The phone number to call us will be ready right away. To take calls is right in the description of this video. It's 888-81-LIBERTY. That's 888-815-4237. Pretty much all the information that we've talked about today is actually in a new guide that we just released on our website. Go to libertyandfinance.com. Click free ebook. You'll see it right on the front page there. Just download the free ebook. It's the Golden Guide to Precious Metal Investing. It kind of goes over, the main questions that we get as brokers. But I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today, and have a great night.
And guys, if you want more of these Ask the Brokers thing, we can do this maybe like once a month if that's helpful to you. So we're happy to answer questions. Nobody asked about shipping, storage, insurance, all kinds of things. So there are lots of questions that didn't get asked. We'll make sure and give you lots of opportunity to do those again in the future. And thanks everyone for being here.